Hello, this is an overview and guide on Enhanced Weapon Deadeye, which in ARK passive system uses the Tactical Bullet node. This video is intended for new to mid-range players looking to see if they want to consider Enhanced Weapon as an alt or main, using the incoming Express Pass with the July patch. That being said, I plan to cover a lot of things to think about outside of just build details, so maybe there's some insight to be gained even if you're more experienced. There will hopefully be timestamps to important sections, basically split into class overview, build consideration, gameplay, and other random topics that might be of interest. So first off, why might you want to play Enhanced Weapon? In my opinion, this can be split into what type of class fantasy does this class cater towards, and the actual details of the class implementation in-game. To answer this question at its very core, the whole identity of Enhanced Weapon is to be a gunslinger, a stance-switching class that wields dual pistol, shotgun, and sniper to use their respective skills. Since we have so many weapons, this comes with a lot of skills and versatility. Enhanced Weapon's main damage comes from shooting the gun, especially focusing on the shotgun. And to that end, a majority of other skills that Deadeye has called fillers all help you achieve this goal through various utility. So for example, this would be like having good mobility as well as super armor skills that allow you to hit the boss more if used correctly. So in that sense, this class requires a level of finesse. At its core, Enhanced Weapon is a back attack melee class. So if you want to always be stuck to the boss and be rewarded for doing so, this might be the class for you. For me, personally, Enhanced Weapon is fun because the core gameplay is very simple, but there's room to squeeze out a lot of optimization, and that means getting good at dealing with boss patterns and increasing uptime on the class. Enhanced Weapon is given a lot of tools, and it feels like the damage you output reflects your own actions and decision making. A lot of annoying patterns are DPSable on this class, and it's fun trying to refine this, and when things finally start to click in a raid gate, it's satisfying. And besides that, Enhanced Weapon has a lot of buttons to press. Whenever you're bored, you can just press something. While I hope you have fallen for my short Enhanced Weapon propaganda, there are some shortcomings and the class is not all perfect. In my opinion, a majority of Enhanced Weapon's flaws in the past have already been addressed, and the current state of Enhanced Weapon gameplay is very good. But some major things that might affect your decision to play or not to play Enhanced Weapon might be that Enhanced Weapon has downtime in rotations due to long cooldowns. This is both good and bad, since long cooldowns on big hitters mean very strong burst, allowing you to fulfill your DPS quota by just landing a few skills. But on the other side, the sustained damage is closer to average, and as you get into longer fights on higher item level, the advantage of being incredibly bursty starts to diminish. Don't get me wrong, Enhanced Weapon is still super good in damage and kit departments. I don't think this is enough for me to not recommend the class. Is Enhanced Weapon hard? I feel like there are a lot of misconceptions from the player base around Enhanced Weapon and its difficulty in the current state of the game. While I'm being biased, being a Day Zero Deadeye player, the perception of Enhanced Weapon difficulty comes from before the multiple reworks and buffs that have streamlined the class. The animations have been significantly sped up, close shot falloff has been adjusted to become more lenient, and the introduction of T-Skill and Hyper Awakening means our damage is a lot more reliable to land. Additionally, the presence of long skill cooldowns means it's easy to do decent damage without perfect uptime. Earlier on, you can play as a more bursty class that does a set rotation on good windows and do decently well. Where I think the actual difficulty comes in is learning patterns and getting good cast off as often as possible. But learning patterns and increasing uptime is a universal skill that every class has to deal with. So while Enhanced Weapon objectively might not be the easiest class mechanically, it's easy to understand and there's an obvious path towards increasing DPS and playing more effectively. Does Enhanced Weapon require a lot of investment? Enhanced Weapon doesn't overly rely on gems. Obviously, higher cooldown gems will make the class more fun since you get to hit your skills more, but you will have downtime regardless with the standard builds. It's definitely good as an alt class. In alt tier content, bosses die fast and generally go phase to phase, so Enhanced Weapon excels in the lower end, even or especially even with bad gems. But even in the most recent raids, you don't need excessive gems. You can definitely get away with using Event 7s all the way up to Mortem Hard Mode, which is the current final raid. Okay, so in case you're still on the fence about whether you want to play Enhanced Weapon Deadeye or not, here's a quick list of pros and cons of this class from my point of view. Some noticeable things are Enhanced Weapon is a crit synergy, which means you have hella aura, people love you, and people think you're a Giga Chad. Another thing that I think is big for players that play other classes is that there's minimal chains, so that means you don't have any ready attack buff or setup required in order to do your damage. Enhanced Weapon is also very fluid. Once you have the ARK passive side node, the class gains a lot of mobility and it feels very fluid to play. Also, Enhanced Weapon is quite privileged in the sense that all of our damage skills have paralysis immune, so unless an attack is going to knock you up, you will not get cancelled out of your damaging abilities, which is very good quality of life. On the con side, the main thing is that we have average sustained DPS and long cooldowns. Like, admittedly, the average sustained DPS might be an exaggeration. It's really not that bad at all. It's just not as stellar as our burst. Something else to consider would be that we have the lowest HP coefficient along with Reaper and Gunslinger. So some things that don't kill other classes might just kill you outright, and there's nothing you can do about it. But this only matters if you die, so just don't die. A big one is probably that stance switching takes time to learn the muscle memory for what skills are on what key and what stance you have to be to use certain abilities. So that might be a barrier to learning the class that might stop you from wanting to do it. But once you get used to it, it's fine. You might as well just have 16 abilities on your bar. Also, if you are not playing from close to the game servers, this class might be ping sensitive. I know in the past, the weapon swaps were not client side, so you just had to guess if your weapon would actually switch and press an ability, but I don't play on high ping because I have West Coast privilege on NA West, but not for long though. So yeah, I think those are the main points to think about when considering Enhanced Weapon as a character you want on your roster. Also, in case it helps anyone making their decision, these are the type of classes that I also like to play on top of Enhanced Weapon Deadeye. So for me, Enhanced Weapon Deadeye is fun because all of the skills have impact and you have a lot of tools to just do whatever you want. And then similarly, the other classes on my roster pretty much do the same thing. Destroyer can just straight up ignore boss patterns. Berserker, I play BT, so I can also just ignore boss patterns. The Reaper that I'm going to express kind of does the same thing. You just keep permanent uptime through high mobility. And then DPS Paladin, uh, well, he's just there. So yeah, I think all of these classes have high impact and can do whatever they want, so those are cool too. So if you play those classes, maybe you might also enjoy Enhanced Weapon, or vice versa. I kind of want to let the rest of the video play out, so the video continues with the build at 10 minutes. I'm gonna go over the ARK passive really quick. This is the build I would recommend in general, but if you don't have your ancient gear pieces to give you the extra points to get to 120, you would do something like this. So this is 95 points. You just have 5 excess. For enlightenment, this is what the final enlightenment tree will look like. And then like before you have all of your enlightenment points, it would probably look something like this, I assume. So then the rationale is basically just max out the middle thing, put 1 point into specialist movement, and then dump everything that can't go into the middle into this. And so that would be this once you have all your points unlocked. And then for leap, it's basically pretty obvious. But if you're still like pre 1680 or so, or if you don't have your karma for here yet, you might want to take out Hyper Awakening cooldown in exchange for Hyper Awakening skill damage. Because in short fights, this node is way better than release potential. Like, release potential is better if it gives you extra casts, but you can't guarantee that. But then you're always guaranteed to have a hyper in every raid, so. But yeah, generally, this is fine to take, but then if you want to press T skill more, this is also fine to take. Um, I think the only time where you pretty much should always be taking release potential is if you have full range like level 2 or 3. That's when your T skill does so much damage that it's probably just worth it to try to get an extra cast, because an extra cast will probably make up the difference in this node. So yeah. And that's basically everything there is to say about ARC passive, like, for now. But there are build variations for enhanced weapon that, oh, I forgot to mention the major thing on evolution gear is everyone's setup for crit and swift is going to be different. So what you want to do is go into details, and then without doing anything, or if you're just standing in town and you have no adrenaline stacks, you just go into details and then you look at crit rate, and then you add 34, because we get 34% crit from the sum of adrenaline, back attacking, and our crit synergy. So for this specific build, MP Furnace build, you want to tweak your crit and swiftness so that it's about 98 to 100% after you add 34. So for example, right now, I am 64 plus 34 is 98.25. That's pretty good. You just don't want to put in excess crit rate. So you can go under, but don't go over. So this is perfectly fine. But you generally don't want less than like 80% or so. Even 80% is starting to get in the frustrating territory where if you don't create your T skill, it'll just be super annoying. And also note that I have quite a bit of crit rate from my accessories and bracelets, so you might have to end up putting, I think, close, maybe like eight crit points in the beginning. And then if you get crit lines on your accessories or crit line on your bracelet, then you can tweak this downwards. But yeah, I would recommend around 85 to 90% after adding 34 if you want to have swiftness. And then if not, if you just want to always crit, then just put all your points in crit and then get to about 98 or so. The reason it's 98 is because supports have a bracelet effect, and most of them equip the one that will basically give the whole team 1.8 up to 2.5% crit. So if you want to leave space for that and not have to check every support's bracelet, that's what you should be doing. But yeah, the main thing is to take into account your own character's crit rate from external sources because everyone's crit distribution will be different. Okay, so after talking about MP furnace and crit distribution, it's fitting to talk about the other build, which is blunt spike or blunt thorn. This one is a higher damage ceiling, and it's basically just gambling. Like on average, your expected value is a bit higher if you have all the sources of crit rate required to make this work. But you can be unlucky and just do less damage because you never crit. So that's just the price you have to pay for having a higher ceiling. But if you do high roll in a pull, you will do so much more damage with blunt. So this is what a typical blunt thorn build would be. And if you don't understand how blunt thorn works, you basically just want to get 119.2% crit instead of 100%. So remember how we added 34? We do the same thing here, and we want to get it to around 117-ish in order to account for bracelet effects. So then for me right now, plus 34 is 115. And well, that's perfectly fine. So this is just what I run if I want to play this node. In general though, I do recommend Mana Furnace, MP Furnace, since it's just so much more reliable. Especially when you're like learning raids, you want to have guaranteed damage that will always like be relatively equal. Since if you just do random amounts of damage, it's kind of bad for feedback if you know that you're doing well or something. And also it's not frustrating since most of your numbers will be yellow instead of gambling on 80% with blunt. Okay, so for engravings, Enhanced Weapon Deadeye has a surprisingly high number of potential engravings that it can use, but note that not all of them are equally worth considering. I'll just go over these pretty quickly. Grudge is easily the best engraving in the game. It just gives 18% unconditional damage, and while there is a damage taken debuff, since everyone takes this, it's really not an issue since raids are balanced around everyone taking extra damage anyways. For Ambush Master, this is the highest damage increase engraving specifically for back attackers. And since all of our shotguns can back attack, this is a very high value engraving. Next is Adrenaline. Adrenaline gives crit rate and attack once it's at max stats. 14% crit rate and 5.4% attack is a very high effective damage increase through crits. And then similarly for Keen Blunt, the amount of crit damage it gives is just so high that even considering the negative on it will be better than most other options. Okay, so those were the main four that you should generally always take. And then since we have 5 slots, the last slot is reserved for one of these 5. In reality, it's really just one of these 3, since Ether Predator and Mass Increase really aren't worth considering unless you have a relic book. I only left them here so this page would be complete and no other engraving that you see would be worth considering in-game. Okay, now the difference between Curse Doll, Stabilized Status, and MP Efficiency increase. For Curse Doll and Stabilized Status, they're both 14% damage with certain caveats. Curse Doll means your incoming healing is reduced by 25%. This means your potions and your support healing. Honestly, it's not a big deal, and the fact that Curse Doll is fully unconditional means you can pretty much overlook the negative healing. And then Stabilized Status is also, I would call it unconditional because the uptime really isn't that hard to achieve for HP higher than 65%, which is the condition. As long as you keep an eye out on your HP bar, this will pretty much always be applied. if you're under 65%, usually your support will top you off or you'll just pot because Deadeye is kind of squishy and you might be in danger of dying. So for MP efficiency increase, this is slightly less damage, but it's pretty much fully unconditional since all of Deadeye skills that do damage cost mana except Awakening. And it also gives MP regen, so if you ever have mana problems, then just take MP efficiency increase. So this is a summary of the potential engraving options. So the top row, Grudge, Ambush, Adrenaline, and Keen Blunt Weapon, you pretty much always take them, and then you take one of the ones in the second row, preferably. I have Stabilized Status Book because my whole roster can use it and it's cheap, so that's what I go for. But if you have mana problems, you can go for MP efficiency increase, or if you don't like the HP requirement, then you can go for Curse Stall instead. Okay, so now that I've went over the engraving selection options, it's a suitable time to go over ability stones or rocks. For rocks, the main thing that you want to keep in mind is that outside of the absolute worst case scenario, rocks don't differ that far from the mean. So they'll be like around 0.1% DPS. So that means you don't have to care too much about what engravings are actually on your rock, but you should just focus on them being usable engravings. So with the Express, they'll probably give you a 7/7 rock because that's what they've done in the past. And if they do that, then just use that. But whatever you do, don't buy rocks on the auction house since the Fion cost will just make it way too expensive. But if you do have to cut rocks, then preferably you have Adrenaline or Ambush and then one of your other engravings, like pretty much guaranteed to be usable. If you cut other combos, it's either suboptimal or it might just occupy another slot. And if you remember in the what engravings to equip, the Keenblunt weapon had a star, and that's basically because if you cut a rock, but your situation means that you basically have to have 6 engravings. If the rock is good enough, you just remove Keen Blunt instead of one of the filler engravings. For example, on my alternate Deadeye, I cut a pretty nasty rock, but that meant I have to drop Keen Blunt Weapon, but it turns out that it's pretty fine because of the fact that the rock is so good and my other options or the other book that replaces Keen Blunt is a relic book. But if you're cutting a regular rock, you want to make sure that you can equip both of them on your regular build. But if you're cutting for something insane like a 10/6 or 9/7, then literally just cut anything that you can equip or anything that you're willing to equip. So if you're willing to use mass increase with a crazy rock, then go ahead and cut those, but otherwise just dismantle. So here are the elixirs that we are aiming for. We want the critical set. The master set is fine if you play blunt, but critical is more universal and it doesn't fall that far behind. And then all the other rolls are correct, except on pants. Additional damage is also fine, and crit damage is good too. And then for the chest, the strength is supposed to be dex. It's a strength because this is a screenshot of my Zerker's elixirs because all of the rules are pretty much correct, but my main has some wrong stats, so yeah. Okay, so this is the skill setup that I use, and I'll show a condensed version from the character info site. So you're perfectly fine to copy this as is, but one of the main things is that if you're still on the newer side, you might want to take off both Conviction and Judgment and replace them for just more Gale Winds on other damaging skills, or even Bleed or Poison. Why I'm saying that is because Conviction Judgment really only came about for people closer to the higher end trying to maximize their DPS by getting more cooldowns, but in a sense, it does give you more chains and you kind of have to change your playstyle around it in order to make it actually be a DPS increase. Okay, so I'm going to go over the DPS skills as well as the filler DPS skills. First up is T skill. We use the shotgun T skill, and before having any karma in the leap tree, the skill is pretty good. It has close shot bonus, and it has quite a long range, but the close shot bonus means you want to be like super close in order to not lose any damage. It does decent damage and it has a long cooldown, so it's pretty reliable. But once you get the leap node makes it so that you always get the close shot bonus from any range. So you can use it from tip range and it'll still get the full damage as if you were really close. So once you get the leap node, the skill is super good. It's probably our hardest hitting skill until you get like level 8 gems, probably, or maybe level 9. But yeah, it hits super hard and it's really reliable unless you don't crit. Next up is Judgment Day. Judgment Day is probably our biggest contributor besides T-skill, and there is a close shot bonus on this, and you can also move during it, so you can follow the boss if the boss is inching forward or backwards slightly. And then we have Shotgun Rapid Fire. This is the next most important damage skill. You're stationary and you fire 3 hits. And then with the combo Rapid Fire tripod, it turns into a combo skill, so you can stop after 1 or 2 hits if you have to dodge without having to use spacebar. This skill also has close shot bonus. Next is Last Request. This skill has both front and back attack modifier, as well as really good stagger, and has 1 weak point. This skill's tripod has a bonus on staggered foes, so you want to prioritize this if somebody lands a counter or the boss is staggered. This skill also has no close shot bonus, so you can do it from the tip range. It's also a counter, but preferably you don't use this to counter because it does extra damage to countered foes and you want to back attack it. Next we have Shotgun Dominator. Shotgun Dominator is a holding skill that has an optional perfect release. It also has close shot bonus, and this one is particularly short, so you have to be more aware when you want to cast this ability. And there's a tripod option on Shotgun Dominator where on the last row you take CQC. This tripod turns it into a fully holding skill rather than a perfect zone skill. So if you ever miss the perfect zone, you might want to consider using CQC, since the damage loss isn't that much, but it does take longer. So you're trading a small amount of damage for consistency and animation. Our last shotgun skill, Sign of Apocalypse. This is just a fast skill, 2 hits. It is also a combo skill, so if you have to dodge, you can just do 1 and then dodge. The range is similar to SRF, and this skill also has close shot bonus. Okay, so for our fillers, we primarily have 3 viable options for fillers. Number 1 is Desperado. The skill is super fun. You're basically just a helicopter, and there's no back attack bonus on this, so you can just do this whenever. Also, I forgot to mention this about Desperado, but since Desperado is a stack skill, it means it's really easy to get cooldown value out of it. As long as you cast it once and the stacks never go back to 2, you get perfect value, basically. This makes it a very friendly skill to use. And then our next filler is a sniper skill, Aim Shot. This skill has a decently long animation, and it's also a holding skill. If you don't hold it, it doesn't fire all the shots. It also has 1 level of leak point on the last hit. Our last potential filler is One Shot One Kill. One Shot One Kill is also a sniper skill, and it has decent range. It's not quite as long as Aim Shot, which can hit things off screen, but it is still pretty good. But yeah, the last row tripod, or the last 2 rows on the skill have options. on the last row, you can take kill confirmation instead of flawless. On flawless marksmanship, it reduces the cooldown if you land it, and it also gives you a stacking damage bonus. This means there is a higher damage potential if you take this tripod and you always land it. But since this skill can be annoying at times to land, it might not be that reliable if you miss your shot. And then you have the kill confirmation tripod as the alternative, which is better for consistency. There's no stack, so you're not punished for ever missing. But then like similarly to the ruler, you're trading damage potential for consistency. And then the row 2 node on one shot one kill is for if you're having trouble landing the skill on small bosses. So since this skill is a point and click, precise aim shot makes it smaller. Yeah, so generally if you aim at the middle of the boss's body, it might not hit because of the viewing angle that this game has. So instead you aim at like its toes. So like if you imagine the boss, you just shoot at the center of gravity on the floor. And then that's where it is. If you have front and back indicators on, you can just click in the middle of the circle, and that's basically the correct spot. And then if you're still having trouble after using that tip, then you can try using heavy rounds. It does the same damage, but it is slower, so you're trading consistency for animation time. For our fillers, I'll go by order of importance. First up is our synergy skills, which are Spiral Tracker and AT-02 Grenade. You want both of these at level 4. What these do is apply a debuff weakness exposure that gives 10% crit resistance debuff to the boss, which is the same thing as giving 10% crit to everyone in your team. This is super important to keep up because crit buff is probably one of the best in the game. Pretty much everyone wants this, so if you don't have uptime on it, people are going to get very annoyed. So you want to make sure that you are casting this quite often. As long as this debuff doesn't get removed while someone's hitting the boss, then you're fine. So yeah, just practice doing some shotgun skills, having like some internal timer on when you want to send another synergy skill, and then just keep doing that. Even when your stuff is on cooldown, you still want to be using your synergy skills because we all want to be carried by our team, and our team can't do DPS if our synergy is not applied. Also, in terms of which ones you should be using, you can have permanent uptime with just grenade. And like in general, that's perfectly fine. And then Spiral Tracker is like your backup. After our crit sin, our next important thing is probably our counter ability. It's pretty important for Deadeye in particular because this counter ability we don't ever use for damage. So if you know there's a boss that has a lot of counters, there's really no reason to not be able to counter it if it's looking at you. Since we don't have to do this in our rotation. We have another counter in Last Request, but you can just use this for damage and then have the dedicated one be the actual counter. This counter has like a short dash attached to it, so you can like if there's some tell by the boss that there's a counter coming up, you can stay within like decent range and then swoop in. As long as you hit the front, you will get the counter. But there is some sort of timing required because it's not like continuous, it's just once. So yeah, you have to get to know the boss patterns, but that's basically what this class does, so Um, Also, there's an option to not use this tripod, but um, it might work, but it's not really recommended. It's it turns into like this disjointed thing where it's the dash and then the kick that's delayed. Um, this used to be how this skill functioned always, and it does have pretty good uses in that like you can counter like this on certain bosses that have a big hitbox. Like you can use it as both the movement and the counter versus having to do a movement and then a counter. Like if you know what I mean. But honestly, I don't recommend not having a tripod on this. Or preferably you just do it and then immediately switch back and then go on DPSing. And then the fact that this is a longer animation is also annoying. Yeah, so preferably just use the tripod. Also, I don't know where to put this, but here's a little tip for just guards and counters. If the just guard or counter has a manual timing, so like it's not on the flash and there's a small delay or something, you can use your pistol auto attack to sort of create an auto timing to make it more easy for you to know when to press the button. And then next up after counter and synergy, would probably be movement. So Deadeye has two main movement skills outside of your spacebar. That's deck shot and somersault shot. Um, I run these both at 4, but you can run them at 1, or for deck shot, you can also run it at 7. So this is deck shot. It's like this 2-part thing. You can choose not to do the second part and just get this distance. It is kind of short, but it's like it has paralysis immunity, so it is kind of protected. So if a boss would do a hit that would push you back, then you can just like use this to move around it instead of walking, which would get you like staggered. So that's nice. And then somersault shot. This thing is just goated. If you need to cover a lot of distance, somersault shot and spacebar can let you chase bosses super well. Especially on certain bosses that like have a counter that might happen after a dash. So you can just do this and then counter. So that's cool. And then speaking of the level 7 on deck shot, the reason you would take it is because the range is super long. Like it's honestly a luxury to have. You do have to lose out on some damage, and you have to be careful about what you take out exactly. Yeah, unfortunately, you probably have to take out a point on a main damage skill to get this, but it is kind of nuts. Like if you want to be super comfy, you just play some amount of swiftness and level 7 deck shot, and you can just fly around. It is super low cooldown too, so yeah, you literally just fly around the whole place. But it does come at the cost of damage. So usually people who run deck shot 7 will be running 1 less damage skill. So they run their 5 shotguns and only 1 more skill to make room for a lot of extra points. So that would look like, yeah, that would probably look like something like this, where you can just max all of your main skills and then you have extra points to put in wherever. Yeah. So that is definitely an option for sure, but it's pretty much guaranteed to do less damage. So that is why um, most people at the higher end don't take it. But it is fine to take, and it's more fun. So okay, so we've talked about movement skills, synergy, counter. Okay, now it's just everything else. So for snipers, Your skill setup probably will look like this. There are 5 sniper skills and 4 slots, so it's a choice between perfect shot and spiral flame. Perfect shot is probably better. Actually, no, I mean, it's whatever. Perfect shot gives weak point, which is nice, but spiral flame is paralysis immune and might have slightly more stagger. Not exactly sure, but what you take in this last slot doesn't really matter. For sniper skills, if you're not using them for damage, they're pretty much utility only. So catastrophe is a push immune skill. So if something would knock you up into the air, or if a generic attack would knock you up into the air, like not some sort of special boss pattern, you would stay on the ground. You would stay grounded. So this is really nice, especially since it's holding. You can decide when to stop, or if your timing is wrong, then you won't be punished for it, since you can just hold it for longer. Also note that this whole animation is push immune. So you have super armor for the whole thing. Like even when you let go, when you're in the middle of firing it, it is still push immune. Perfect shot or spiral flame, whichever one you take, it's pretty much just a stagger check button. Perfect shot also has a weak point, which is nice for destruction checks. One shot, one kill if it's not your main damage, or even if it is, it's just a stagger button. And then now for the leftover fillers, there are a lot more pistol skills, so I'll just go over them real quick. Okay, the current ones I have equipped. Quick shot. Quick shot only has value if you run this specific rune on it, quick recharge. So I'll see if I can get it to proc, but the proc rate might be, or it's just gambling. So you cast something with a long skill, 50 seconds, and then yeah, immediately procced, and then now it dropped by like 10 seconds. So yeah, that's what this skill does. You just spam this skill when you have nothing to do, and then you pray that your cooldowns go down. If it goes down, then this is arguably like one of the most important buttons that you have. So I always recommend this, even if you're not a tryhard, because it's just so much value for like 1 second. The effect is based on current cooldown remaining instead of maximum cooldown time. So the best time to do it would be after spending all of your high cooldown skills and then having nothing to do. But this is just RNG, but it has a decent proc rate, so it's pretty good. And then last filler. Oh wait, Cruel Tracker. You mainly take it for weak point, and then also some stagger, but the stagger's kind of bad, so it's mainly weak point. Yeah, this doesn't really do damage, but if you have nothing else to press, you might as well. And then the other options are Meteor Stream, Equilibrium, Deathfire. Equilibrium, we generally do not run this. Okay, that's pretty bad. Meteor Stream, you also just never take this. Like this button doesn't do anything for enhanced weapon. Like the most it does is a small amount of stagger, but it's really slow, so it's not worth it. Plasma Bullet. Or this has some niche uses, technically. For example, if you run Judgment, if you run Conviction Judgment, this can be a proc on Judgment. But personally, I don't think this is worth wasting a slot on. Yeah, so due to the number of hits, it procs it pretty reliably, but it's just not good since like it's a single use skill, but it doesn't have like anywhere near the amount of value that quick shot with quick recharge can have. So for that reason, we don't take it. Oh yeah, there is Deathfire, which is an okay choice. So this skill is another push immune, but we don't really use it. Reason being that there is a really annoying end lag. There is tech for this move though, so if you tap it for a short amount of time, you'll see I shine white, which means I'm immune. So you can just tap it, and you have push immunity during that time. But I'm not sure if that's ping sensitive or something. It does work, but it's really just not worth going for, since there's really not that much in the game that you can't dodge, or that will be helpful with you doing this. Since like you can always just spacebar, you can always just move out of the way, you can always just use the other push immune that's actually good. But yeah. So yeah, just take Cruel Tracker and be done. So now is the part of the video where I actually explain how to play the class. And hopefully you've watched at least some amount of the earlier parts, but if you didn't, I really don't blame you. The video is way too long. Anyways, or to understand how this class works, we want to look at the ARK passive. So you can like pause the read or whatever, but the ARK passive basically says when you switch your gun, you gain 3 stacks of tactical bullet, which empowers your next 3 skills. So in order to take advantage of this, we want to make sure that whenever we're doing DPS skills, we never do more than 3 in the same stance in a row. Also note that the condition doesn't require you to use another weapon's skill in order to refresh when you go back to the weapon. So it's like if you do your 3 skills on shotgun, you don't have to do a skill from another weapon in order to get the buff back. You just get it for switching a weapon at all. So in certain situations where if you're trying to do your burst window, you can do like a sort of empty swap where you just swap back and forth really fast. This will allow you to get your shotguns off more efficiently. And while it's not always used, it's good to know, because sometimes you really just don't have time to send like your synergy in between, or else the boss is just gonna do something else. And you really need the time instead. Okay, so basically now that we know how the ARC passive works, the other things that we have to keep in mind are adrenaline. So adrenaline requires you to cast 6 abilities to activate the buff. And then you can refresh it for 6 seconds every time another button is pressed. So you really only have to make sure you stack the buff like after any downtime or at the beginning of the fight. Don't let adrenaline run out during the middle of a fight, since the adrenaline 6 stack is so much damage that it's better to just keep it up in the background even during downtime. Or at least if you don't upkeep the buff, pre-stack it before the boss comes back so you can immediately go back to hitting the boss. Okay, so we have our ARC passive, engraving, and adrenaline. Now the last thing you have to always keep in mind is we have to keep our synergy on. If you have a fight opener and you're trying to get your burst out as fast as possible, you're going to have to do all of your shotgun skills, and then also keep your synergy up for yourself and your team, and then also your own class buffs, which come back on changing weapons. So when you use your shotgun skills after you use 3, you can switch back, use the synergy skill, and then switch back to shotgun again. And then this will refresh both your synergy and your class buff. So you just do nade, do your 3 skills or whatever, switch, and then do spiral tracker, and then do your other 3 skills. And then once you're done with this, you can fit in a sniper or something, or some sort of movement, and then reapply. For your filler skills though, you want to be using them whenever you can't do damage with your shotguns. So a lot of these filler skills are able to do damage in situations that it's not good to press your shotguns in. For example, if there's a pattern or it's dangerous to be at the boss's back or close to the boss's back, then your filler skills can do a good job at squeezing out some amount of DPS on what's usually downtime for other back attackers. Also, in tier 4, specialist movement side node is probably the biggest change to happen to enhance weapon Deadeye. So what this does is whenever you finish a shotgun, you basically have a duration where you can just input a dash in any direction. And this dash is like protected. It has super armor, as in push immunity. So technically this class has push immunity on demand as long as you're aware of the boss's patterns and can time your attacks to end in time with the boss's hits. But honestly, it is useful in certain cases, but the more important part is the actual movement that you gain from this node. So this node basically allows you to DPS at like walking speed. And then since all but one of Deadeye's main DPS skills are stationary, this is really helpful when the boss is moving around or being erratic at all. If you use this well, it helps you get a lot of uptime. If you use this well, it helps you get a lot of uptime because you can greed a lot of attacks using the shotgun dash. Also, when I was looking for clean images of these skill icons, I never really saw this, but I couldn't help but notice a striking similarity between this and another shotgun user's ability to dash. But that's not the main focus of this video, so. Okay, so I'm about to compile and upload this soon, and it is like 2 a.m. But I realized that I didn't actually say like what type of rotation or what your rotation would actually look like in game. So that's my bad, but I'll try to explain it really quick. So basically, the things that I said before about keeping your buffs up, so adrenaline, critsin, and tactical bullet, you want to make sure all of those are active at the same time, and then while those are active, you can just use your shotgun skills. Or on the page before, there was a DPS priority for our skills. You basically just go down the list, and then once your shotguns are done, you just do your snipers and then desperado. And then all while keeping these 3 buffs, adrenaline, critsin, and tactical bullet, all while keeping those 3 buffs alive. So that's basically just how you play the class. Okay, so this is the end of the video. I really wanted to integrate more gameplay footage on the things that I was talking about, but to be honest, I thought Express was coming out in August. So yeah, I hope this video helped at least one person. And then if there's any criticism for either the content or the um, production, please let me know. Bye bye.